Hey, welcome back to another episode of Mike Check Real Life. My name is Mike, and I am your host. I'd like to thank you for joining us on our journey here. First thing I would like to request before we get started is if you could like and share this episode so we can get the word out to those that need to hear it. We really are trying to be an encouragement here for those that are out there still struggling in life, and we'd like to be able to offer some hope. So even if this episode doesn't speak to you personally, everybody knows somebody that's out there struggling. And if you could just help us reach them, that would be so amazing. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube, if you could subscribe, that helps the algorithms show that this is actually of value. Also, if you're listening to the podcast audio on any of the many podcast hosting sites that we're on, if you wouldn't mind rating our program, that would help us in the algorithms there. So, with that being said, I won't ask any more of you. Let's go ahead and get started with today's episode. Thank you so much, and God bless.
All right, everybody. I'd like to just take an opportunity here to welcome my good friend, Fred Clark. Fred, how are you today?
I'm good. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. So I'm going to give you an opportunity here real quick to just introduce yourself. And just like with anybody else we have in here, we're just going to go ahead and jump right into it and give you an opportunity to share your testimony. So,
Okay. Well, let's see. I'll be 42 this year. I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Been a believer for about half my life. Started in the faith when I was 20 years old. And prior to that, I was an atheist. And I don't know. That's about it, I guess.
okay. So you've been here locally most of your life? Or?
Yeah, I've lived in Chattanooga for the majority of my life. Besides about 10 years when we lived in South Florida when I was a kid. That was from like 1 until 11.
All right. Well, let's start early on. We'll go right back. It's always best to start from the beginning. So who was Fred Clark? And we'll get to who is Fred Clark today.
Well, let's see. I guess really to talk about myself, I'd have to talk about my dad too, because my dad was born 52. He served in the military. He joined the National Guard because he had dropped out of high school when he was in the 10th grade. So to avoid getting drafted and having to go to Vietnam, he joined the military when he was like 17 and was in the National Guard for 7 years. Him and my mom got married in 3. He was young. She was like 19 and he was 12 years older than her. So he was like 31. And then I was born in 84, actually 4 days after their 1-year anniversary. So I was born in May of 84. Lived in Florida for the first 10 years of my life. We lived in South Florida, like Palm Beach, Lake Worth.
Nice area.
Around Lake Okeechobee, like right on the coast there area, Fort Lauderdale. And my dad was a carpenter and electrician by trade. I started going to work with him when I was probably like 5 years old. He started teaching me how to do carpentry work and help him, do stab out electrical work, like putting in receptacles and stuff like that. Around 5 or 6 years old, I remember being like 7 years old on a job site, mixing mortar and carrying blocks to do an addition on a lady's house that he was working for. So started out really young working. My dad started teaching me how to do construction work and carpentry work. And I'd say by the time I was 12, I could finish sheetrock. I could sweat fittings on plumbing and stuff like that. Like he really wanted to give me his trade and spent a lot of time and effort investing into that. My dad, because of his military career, drinking was a very big thing when he was in the military, and it carried over into his adult life. Like I was thinking about it yesterday about talking to you about all of this, and it was like, I remember as a kid, like thinking of beer was just, to me, was like an adult drink, like drinking water or a soda or something.
Right.
Like that was the level that he drank alcohol on. Like it was every day. I mean, when he did electrical work, he would drink a 6-pack for lunch. Like it was just, I didn't know that beer did anything to you as a kid, like at that age. I didn't realize that until, sometime in elementary school, that it affected the way that he functioned as a person. And so it was just like a common thing. It was something that I saw all the time. Drinking was a regular, it wasn't even a habit. It was a lifestyle for him. Let's see, I was probably about 7 when he decided that he wanted to have a change of career and decided to go to cosmetology school of all things. and become a hairdresser, not a barber, but a hairdresser.
Right.
And to be able to do like nails and hair and perms and like all the different stuff. And to me, that just seems weird. Like a man that's doing manly labor, like carpentry work and construction, just to have a career change like that. And it didn't make sense to me at the time. But probably a year after that, he came out of the closet to my mom as a crossdresser.
Oh,
I was very close to my father, and we had talked more, and he told me a lot about his childhood. And his dad here in Chattanooga used to take him and drop him off at adult films when he was like 9, 10 years old. So he had a very skewed perception of sexuality and women and just everything like that from a very young age. Like he had been secretly wearing women's clothes and stuff throughout his life, even to the point where my dad had been married 3 different times before my mom, twice to the same woman. So my mom was the 4th marriage that he had. And actually, in one of those marriages, he had got caught with some women's clothing, and it had caused issues in his marriage because he wasn't ready to confess that they were his and not some other random woman's. So I was probably about 7 years old, and he came out of the closet to my mom as a crossdresser. That was very strange for me as a young boy trying to come into my manhood and my masculinity and stuff for him doing that, especially going into like middle school, and having, because back then it was a very taboo thing. And I remember the entirety of my middle school and high school, like trying to hide the fact that he was that way, because he was very open and flamboyant about it. And that was middle school, end of middle school was about the time that AOL became a big thing. And the internet, like he became instantly fascinated with the internet, and he was a people person and definitely very extroverted. He enjoyed talking to people and getting to meet people and things like that. I'm also that way. I'm very extroverted. I get that from him. So he made for himself a very big presence on like AOL chats. And back then there was a website called Pal Talk where you could do like video chat rooms. And that was like the early days of video chat rooms, where it's like grainy cameras where you're like very pixelated, like interesting days, wild west of the internet, in my opinion. Someone approached my dad on a cross-dresser homosexual chat room and was asking him a bunch of questions, and basically come to find out that it was like a promoter for a talk show that was nationally syndicated. It was the Dr. Joey Brown show out of New York, and it actually played on a local TV station here in Chattanooga. He basically had told them that my mom didn't know that he was just a cross-dresser, even though she had known at this point for probably 8 years. So they paid for him to go to New York, him and my mom, to go on this talk show and come out of the closet to my mom as a crossdresser. So they went then, and then they went for a follow-up episode where my aunt went with them. And like people at my school, parents were like watching this because they knew my aunt and knew my mom. And so they're like talking about it at school and stuff like that. And it's like, was very hard for me as a teenager dealing with that and dealing with my father, like just not really caring about like what was going on in my life or anything like that. It was just, he wanted to get a free trip to New York. So he lied to these people and went to New York and went on national TV. And it was just rough, like, being a man and trying to be masculine, and people know that your dad's like a lady man that, wears women's clothes and is, I remember one of the most traumatic experiences for me was being probably like 12 years old and waking up late at night and coming out of my bedroom, which was basically you walk to the front door and my bedroom was straight. And then there was the living room, and my mom and dad were in the middle of having a threesome with a black guy in our living room. Just seeing the level of sexual immorality that my dad involved himself with in my childhood was very, very hard for me. And then I feel like it carried over into my adult life with my relationships with women and pornography and stuff like that. Like never anything homosexual, but still that sexual immorality definitely followed me around and was something that I struggled with in my adult life. So that was one of the things that happened in my childhood that was extremely difficult for me to bear. But with my dad being a military man, it was very hard and very hard-hearted, and especially when he would drink, there was just you were living with two different people. And prior to me being born, my mom told me that there were times, or even in my youth, that he had put out cigarettes on her face and would wake up in the middle of the night punching her, and she would wake up in the middle of the night with him on top of her, like punching her in the face. They were taking a trip to Florida probably right before I was born, and they were riding in a station wagon that's just had a bench seat in it. And I remember my mom telling me that, because she was very innocent and didn't know a whole lot of anything. I mean, she was 19 when they got together and 20 when I was born, but she said she remembered him sliding over next to her. He'd been drinking, and he put his foot on top of her foot on the gas pedal and pushed the gas pedal to the floor and was like maxing the car out on its speed, and was like telling her like, "Oh, you're going to have to toughen up. Like the world's a tough place and you've got to be strong." And just like the level of abuse that my mom endured in her relationship with my father is astounding to me. And as I got older, my dad would involve me in that abuse. They would fight, and they would get into arguments and decide that, oh, they're going to split up or something like that. And my dad would do everything he could to pit me against my mom, to divide me against my mom, to get me to hate my mom. I remember being probably 6 or 7 years old, and my mom and dad were fighting, and my dad was coaching me all day about, we're going to leave this bitch, and you're going to go with me, and you've got to decide who you want to be with, and you need to, like talking to me, like talking me up, like you need to make the choice of who you want to be with. And I love my dad. I spent a lot of time with my dad. My mom worked her up off, man, like all the time. She would work 12-hour shifts. She was a CNA at a head, neck, and injury hospital in Boca. And so she would work 12-hour shifts at the hospital, 6, sometimes 7 days a week. So my mom would sleep a lot when she would come home because she worked all night. And so I didn't get to see my mom a lot. I didn't spend a lot of time with my mom. My interaction with my mom was very limited, but my interaction with my dad, I was always with my dad. Like he started taking me to work with him when I was like 5 years old. I can remember him doing a commercial job at auto parts place, and he was cutting some holes in the sheetrock and putting in fire foam or something along those lines. And he was like asking me questions like, well, why am I doing this? Like, what purpose does this serve? And I remember him asking me specific questions, and I was answering these questions, and figuring this stuff out at a very young age. So I was always with him, always spending time with him. So of course, when he's telling me I have to decide on who I want to live with, I'm going to pick him, like, because he was my best friend. Like he was a person that I spent most of my waking hours with, besides like in school. Well, I mean, prior to even going to school. And I remember him just telling me like, well, you got to decide on what you're going to do. And I don't know how it happened. He hid behind the door of our house. And when my mom came through the front door, he was waiting on her, and he had his gun. He had his 357. And he grabbed a hold of my mom and sat her down on the arm of the couch, because it was basically, you came through the door and the couch was right here. He sat her on the arm of the couch, and he cocked the gun and held it to her head and told her all of this, and told her that we was leaving her. And then he had this throwing knife, or a boot knife, and he put it in my hands. And while he sat there and held my mom at gunpoint, he had me go through the living room and cut up all of the furniture, like cut up all the cushions on the couches. And we had like some director's chairs, like the folding chairs that have the canvas seats in them, and had me cut those up, and just had me cut up everything in the house, and basically show my mom that I wasn't hers, that I was his. Was not going to be with her, not going to be around her, that she was going to be alone. He wanted to make sure that she knew she was going to be alone. And I just remember my mom bawling her eyes out and begging him to shoot her, and just saying, just kill me. just kill me over and over again. And just knowing that I was part of causing my mom all that pain, because my mom has done nothing in my life but strive to love me and take care of me and do good for me and to give me good experiences. I was taking the side of the person that was hurting both of us. And I remember it was probably 10 years ago that I really come to that realization of how much I hurt my mom. And even though I know that I was young and my dad was manipulating me, I had to go to my mom and apologize to her for that, because it hurt. It haunts me that my dad would pit me against my mother that way to cause this. And it was always, there was like this underlying thing of like, I didn't respect my mother as a kid. My father taught me to disrespect my mother. That carried over into my adult life and affected relationships that I had with women in the past. And Abba has really had to work on my heart in helping to correct me and to help the seed of anger that was sown in me, because I was a very timid kid prior to that, cutting up that furniture and stuff. I don't really remember being violent as a kid.
Right.
But I know at that point, it was like there was something that shifted in me that day, because things started being in Florida, in South Florida. It was a melting pot in school. There was all kinds of different races and ethnicities of people in the school. And I was a minority. Like there were more people that weren't white than white people. I mean, I'm partially Native American also, but I was the minority, and I would get picked on a lot in school, like abused. Like I remember being beat with a wiffle ball bat, just swinging on the swings during after school care. I remember one time being out at the kickball field and after school care, where you would stay after school when your parents would work. They would pay for you to stay, and just like 6 or 7 kids out on the kickball field, all throwing rocks at me and just picking on me. And I remember it was wild that one day I picked up one rock that day. And interestingly enough, the main kid that was throwing rocks at me was also the kid that beat me with a wiffle ball bat and left whelps all over my back while I was swinging on the swing. I wasn't even trying to fight with him. I was actually intimidated by that kid. And I remember that day, he was like the ringleader of the ones that were throwing rocks at me. Well, I picked up one rock that day and threw it back and hit that kid right in the head and caused him to have stitches. And it was like, and the school was mad at me, like I was the aggressor in the situation, even though I always have, ever since elementary school, been treated like a black sheep and looked at as an aggressor because I would stand up for myself. My dad started teaching me at a young age to stand up for myself. After those kids beat on me and did those things to me, him being in the military started teaching me how to fight. And I mean, teaching me like military self-defense fighting, like throat punching people, kicking them in the chest, like whatever was necessary to get them off of me and get them to stop. So I remember being like 8 years old and throat punching a kid in elementary school and kicking him in the chest and getting suspended from school for 3 days. But so that violence wasn't me as an aggressor, but it was the way I learned to protect myself. Was if I could be violent, if I could be angry, if I could meet aggression with an aggression that was mightier, tenfold times the aggression that I was being met with, then I could protect myself. I could guard my heart. I could protect the innocence, the softness that was in me that I didn't want anybody to see, because people would take advantage of that when they saw it. So I picked up a lot of bad things from my father, not the alcoholism, but in other ways, probably in drug use. So he had gotten jaundice in probably early 2000, and probably my sophomore year of high school. And then he had stopped drinking, but my grandmother died. I believe it was September of 2001. I believe it was right around when 9/11 happened. Like she may have died like right before 9/11 happened. So my dad went on he went straight back to drinking, like bender drinking. So I was probably 15 when that happened. And that's where I got this scar here on my arm.
Okay.
After that, I was laying on the floor one day with my hands down like this. My dad was a bit sarcastic, pretty funny guy. Always had a comeback to say to everything. So I picked that up from him. But when I would do it to him, it would infuriate him. And I remember he was sitting on the couch and I had said something snarky. And this was back when he had started drinking heavily again. And he smoked cigarettes, and he had took that ashtray that he had in his hand and slammed it down on the coffee table. And it broke in half and flew across the room, because I was probably maybe 10 feet across the room from him, sitting in the floor watching the TV, and the ashtray hit me in the arm and laid my arm open probably 2 inches wide. I was in the Boy Scouts at the time, so understood first aid pretty well, because when that happened, he refused to allow me to go to the hospital. Like, he was not going to go to jail for getting upset and smashing an ashtray and it cutting my arm open. But I remember it cut my arm open, and then there was a shard of glass sticking out of my skin. I had to grab it and pull it out, and then take my hand and like roll the flap of skin back up, because it rolled back to the point where I could see like the layer of fat in the tissue right there. And it created a weird bonding moment for me and my dad, because my dad got really upset with himself and was like, oh, well, he had this thing about, like, when things got bad or hard, he would try to like run away. And we were back in Tennessee at that time. So the first thing he wanted to do was go to Florida. So he got in the car and drove to Florida for a few days. And I ended up going with him. And I remember just having my arm bandaged up and having to put butterfly bandages on the wound to hold it shut so it would heal up, because there was no stitches or anything ever applied to it. Just washed it out, because it had ashes and stuff in it from the ashtray. Clean the wound out real good. And then with my mom being a CNA, she understood wound care and stuff too. So cleaned the wound out real good, closed it up with steri strips, and then wrapped my arm up with gauze and just went on about my life. And I don't even remember how long it took for it to heal up, but I remember going to Florida, and like, I could tell that my dad regretted what he did, because he made every effort to restore our relationship while we were gone for those couple of days down to Florida. And it helped me to see a different side of my father. And later, reflecting on the things, because I was very bitter towards my father till I was probably 30. He died when I was 19, and it took me about 11 years to really come to a place of forgiveness. So I turned 30 in 24. I got divorced from my first wife in 2013. So it was probably not too long after that, and realizing my own failures in my marriage and the things that happened between me and my first wife and the ways that I failed her. Because, it's hard to love somebody when you're broken.
Right.
And, and I really did truly, like, she was my best friend in high school. And I really did truly, like, love her with the fullness of what I had in me, even though it was broken. And just realizing through my own failures in my marriage and the things that happened between us, that my dad, thinking about the stories he told me of the abuse that his father had done to him, letting him go and watch pornography at 9 and 10 years old, and the damage that it had caused him in his childhood, and then the damage that the military, being 17 years old and joining the military in an era where it was like kill, kill, kill is what they trained him. And he was in the Airborne Rangers and in the artillery division prior to that in the Chattanooga National Guard. And that was just, they drilled it into his head, and it affected him the entirety of his life. He'd never saw combat, but that man had PTSD from the military. Like, thinking back on it now, I recognize the indicators of the PTSD that he experienced. And it took a long time for me to come to a place of forgiveness, of recognizing that hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
And that my dad was functioning out of what he had learned, and he was trying to love me, and he really was trying to care about me in a lot of ways. He was just doing it from a broken place, and he didn't have what was necessary to be a good father to me, because nobody had taught him. Nobody showed him what it meant to be a good father. Well, it took a long time for me to overcome anger and frustration and violence, and wanting to meet hurt with violence. And it's like, what better way to let somebody know that they've hurt your feelings and to put your hands on them or use your words to tear them apart? And that was something that I picked up, was tearing someone apart with my words, saying the things that I knew like the things that they would share with me, their vulnerabilities, their weaknesses, their things that they were most fearful of. And they would speak those things to me. And I'm not a person that easily forgets. So in the back of my mind, when I would get mad, I would be reminded of those weaknesses or those insecurities, and I would use them against the person to hurt their feelings or to attack them or to let them know that they had hurt me in some way because I didn't know how to communicate. I didn't know what it meant to communicate to someone. I didn't know what it looked like to have solid communication and, being able to express myself without it being using my words to hurt or poke or punch or jab at the other person. So, yeah, just going through that. And my dad died at 19. That was what I was getting to before. There was this guy that worked at the gas station. He was a young kid, not much older than me, probably early 20s. And me and my cousin, started doing coke with him. And my family had planned a trip down to Gulf Shores, like a huge family vacation. It was like my mom has there's 5 kids, including my mom. So she had 4 siblings. So it's like I have 11 cousins, 10 cousins on her side of the family. So there's a bunch of cousins, and then several of them have kids. So planned a big, huge family vacation down to Gulf Shores, Orange Beach, Alabama. So we took my dad's ashes to spread them in the ocean. But it was right before that I started doing coke with this guy, with my cousin. Because I had probably started smoking pot when I was like 16 or 17, whenever I first started driving. It was after I was in the Boy Scouts because I was a goody goody prior to that. Like when I was in the Boy Scouts, like I remember telling on another kid because I was a senior patrol leader in my scout troop because I wanted to be different from my father.
Right.
Always wanted to be different from my father. So I tried to make efforts to invest myself into things. Like I was very invested in the Boy Scouts. Like I became the senior patrol leader of my troop. I was in the Order of the Arrow, did everything I could to help my scoutmaster get our patrol a quality unit award for 98. Like I was very invested in scouting and doing something different with my life and being positive and walking in those things like what the Boy Scouts taught, all the scout motto, do a good turn daily, and just all the things, obedience, kindness, faithfulness, cheerfulness. Like those were things that I wanted to exemplify in my character. And the enemy was always at me, even in my youth prior to, because I'm an overachiever. When I do something, I want to do a good job.
Mm-hmm.
And in my scout troop, my scoutmaster was having marital problems, and a part of that was the amount he was in the reserves at the time and trying to juggle a family and juggle a scout troop. And anyways, he had stepped up as the scoutmaster because our other scoutmaster had taken us to summer camp and left us at summer camp by ourselves while he went home to work in Chattanooga, and we were on Montego Mountain without adult supervision for an entire 8 days of summer camp. So he got kicked out as a scoutmaster of our troop. And this guy had come in, his name was Jason Bolin. And this man's like probably one of the most positive influences I can remember. Like he was one of my adopted dad figures. I looked up to that man as a dad figure because he was the epitome of what I wanted in a father, and in his heart and his kindness and his willing to teach me and his gentleness of teaching me. And anyways, he ended up having to step down as a scoutmaster because his life was falling apart, or at least that's what I remember. And he was unable to do it anymore. And I remember it just breaking me. And I can imagine what it did to him emotionally because I cried like a little baby in front of him over it because it just, like I looked up to that man so much. And I tried to join another troop, and I was a senior patrol leader of my troop, and I was only a first class scout, which is like your first 4 ranks is like tenderfoot, and then you have first and second class. So it's like the basic bottom 3 ranks. And then you have Star, Life, and Eagle Scout, which is the top 3 ranks. So I joined this other troop, and the older kids were all star ranked by that time. So they're basically putting me in with kids that are like middle school age, and I'm now in a freshman in high school. And, I'm basically had everything I needed to become a Star Scout. And anyways, and because my other troop folded, I wasn't able to get my rank prior to the troop folding up. So I went to this other place, and I felt so out of place because they're like teaching these kids that are 2, 3 years younger than me all the things that I already know, like knot tying and all the basic requirements of scouting. So it's like I felt like I was starting over again. So I went to one meeting at that scout troop, and I'm just like, and I wore my scout uniform, and I've got my like senior patrol leader patch sewn on my uniform, and they're like looking at me funny because I'm a senior patrol leader, but usually it's the higher ranked scouts that get that rank, or that position rather. So it's pretty devastating to me. So after that, it was like 16, started hanging out with my cousins, started drinking alcohol a little bit. I remember getting drunk on New Year's with them when I was 16. That would have been Y2K, somewhere around in that range. But anyways, I started smoking pot when I was 17, and then started doing coke with that guy that worked at the gas station. And we went to Florida. And I remember coming back from Florida, there was a neighbor that lived up the road that we would buy pot from that was a meth cook, and started hanging out with him and spending a lot of time at his house because like if you hung out, you could do dope for free. And so probably about 6 months I was doing dope and stuff with him, 6 months or so. And then he went to jail over some stuff that had happened that he had involved me and my cousin in. Actually, his wife's cousin had stole from him and had me and my cousin there videotaping while he like pretty much kidnapped this lady. Like she come to his house to buy pills or something from him or sell pills to him. And he like wrapped her up in duct tape and punched her in the face and like had me and my cousin there, had me like holding the door shut. And my cousin was filming it on a video camera. And you're probably one of the only people I've ever talked to about that. Like, wow. And after he went to jail after that because she left and called the police. And I don't blame her. But I mean, he like Popeye punched her in the face. Like I remember him taking his fist and like winding up like this and then punching her in the face. And I was holding the door shut, like had the door barred shut while her old man was like beating on the door outside. And just I remember after that, like I was like, man, I don't want any part of that nonsense. Like, my goodness, like the things that could have come of that. Like I could have been shot or anything that night. Or like, what if I did something and he turned on me and did those things to me? Like, but anyways, so it was like right after that. Let's see, it would have been my dad died in April of 2003 from cirrhosis. So he had after my grandmother had died in 2001, my dad just gave up. He was done with life. And he drank nonstop, just all the time. Ended up with cirrhosis of the liver after having jaundice. His liver went to functioning at like 18%, 10%, and he died from cirrhosis in 2003 in April. So the following year in May, my ex-wife and I were the same age, but she was homeschooled. That's actually how I became a believer.
Okay.
She was Torah observant from birth. She was raised keeping the Sabbath and the feast and eating clean from birth. So she was homeschooled up until the time she was probably 8th grade age. But because she was homeschooled, her dad didn't teach her some things that were necessary she could read and everything, but there were certain things that she was very low level on, like below where she needed to be. So her dad started getting dementia and she started going to school at about 8th grade age. But because she was not to level, they started her in 6th grade. So she had to start 2 grades under where she would have been at. So she graduated 2 years. I should have graduated in 2002. but I ended up graduated in 2003 to go an extra year. And she graduated in '04, the year after that. So after she had been dating this guy that lived up the road from me, and they had broke up, and we started seeing each other in May of 2004. And I remember we had a keg party up in the woods to celebrate her graduation and several other people that were in her grade that I was friends with from high school. Because there was my grandmother owned like 16 acres where I lived at. So I had woods and we could party in the woods up by the tower because it was a gravel access road to get up there. And we were far enough away from anybody. We could start a fire up there and do whatever, and it wouldn't matter. We could raise all the hell we wanted to up there, like, and it not be an issue. So anyways, we had a keg party up there, and her and I ended up sleeping together. Well, I mean, we were very close friends prior to that, and we ended up sleeping together and then just started dating, like off the rip. Started dating in May of 2004, and we were together for 9 years. So when we started dating, she told me, she's like, well, I don't eat pork and this and that. So I'm like, okay, well, I just won't buy it. It's not a big deal. I can just buy turkey when I buy the lunch meat and stuff for the house. So I started not eating pork out of respect for her. That was mid 2004. I think the last time I can remember eating pork intentionally was probably the beginning of 2005, like early January 2005. And then after that, I was fully convicted of, because by May of 2005, I was working full time at Winn-Dixie, the grocery chain, and I was keeping the Sabbath because when I'd started that job, I told them I wouldn't work on Saturdays. So probably 2005, I started keeping the Sabbath. Prior to that, I was an atheist because my dad never really raised me to believe anything or think anything along those lines. So it was through that relationship, and actually her family was telling me all this stuff that they believed about keeping the Sabbath and eating clean and all this and that. And I'm like, man, you guys are just like the rest of Christianity. You say one thing and do something else. I'm like, you just like the rest of them, you probably talk out of both sides of your mouth. And I actually started out trying to disprove them. I'm like, well, I'm going to look at what you're saying. I'm going to look at what it says in the Bible, and then we're going to go from there. So I started with the intention of like, well, I'll show you, like, I've studied religion.
I know more.
And exactly, arrogant, 20-year-old kid that don't know a whole lot about anything, has read a few books on witchcraft and different Buddhism and different things like that, and kind of, just dabbled in some things, started studying to disprove these people. And the more I read, the more I went there on Sabbath to study with them, the more I was like, well, they actually are doing what they're saying. They're actually committed and they're being real. And like there were drug addicts in her family, there were alcoholics in her family, there were all kinds of mixed multitude of crazy people and people with a past. And I was watching these people, even though they were broken and screwed up and weird, they were struggling to serve God. They were struggling to serve the Father. They were struggling to serve Yahweh. And that impressed me. And I'm like, well, you know what? I've come from the same place. I've got a very similar history. Their family looks like my family, just different. If they can strive for something better, then I could strive for something better. And I remember, and I told you the part about me being committed and wanting to do a good job. Anytime I choose to do something, I put the fullness of myself into
Right.
it. It's all or nothing with me. Like I don't halfway do anything.
Right.
Like when I do a job, I want it to look perfect.
Right.
If it doesn't look perfect, it will bother me for the rest of my
I'm
life.
the same.
Like I will literally wake up in the middle of the night, not have anything on my mind to be thinking about the one imperfection in my job that I didn't like.
Yeah.
Like to the point where I remember remodeling a house one time for a guy, and it was a rough timber frame house and using like heartwood pine and stuff in it. Like, and it was built over 30 years. Like the original house was built in the 40s. Then there was additions in the 50s and the 60s, and you could see the level of building materials as they changed. Well, most of the door frames in the house were 8 inches wide. and I had to build, like, fabricate door frames and then make the doors and hang them myself. Like, I would go buy the pre-made door, but I would make the jambs and the shoe molding and everything and build the whole door frame out. And I remember just like the inside board where it met the edge of the wall was off by like less than a 16th of an inch. And it bothered me so bad that I went back the next day and tore the door frame apart and redid it to where it would be just perfectly lined up. Because I mean, I was going to caulk the seams anyways.
Right.
All that would have been hidden, but it's like, that's how much of a stickler I am for making sure that my work is accurate and done well. And I think that that carried over into my assembly job, because I would go into stores and build bicycles that people's kids were going to be put on. And the thing that I would tell myself every time I build a bike is like, if I don't have any kids, but the question I'd ask myself, if I had kids, would I let them ride this bike? And so I say that to let you know, like, how devoted I am to being accurate, doing a good job, and being just, all in. So when I came in this walk, it was like everything I knew, Christmas, all that stuff that was from my past, it went away. All of that went away. None of it mattered to me anymore, because I wanted to do what I found in Yahweh's word more than anything, more than having a relationship with my family, even. Like, I divided, and it wasn't good. It wasn't good for me how can I witness to those people in my family if I separate myself from my family and say, hey, I don't have any part with you because I don't believe the same way that you do anymore. Even to the point where I would go there for like Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners, and then I would argue with them about why it's bad to eat pork and like be just hateful about it and stuff. But there was one time, there's a thing that I can remember about that just cracked me up. It was probably 2 years after I stopped eating pork. I went to my grandmother's house with the intention, I'm like, I'm not going to say anything to them this time. I'm not going to try and start an argument over something like this. They'll figure it out. So we got there, we're eating Thanksgiving. They're cutting on the ham. They get down into the ham next to the bone, and there was gangrene in it, like rot in the middle of the ham that they were all eating and talking about how great it was. And I just looked at them and said, well, that's why I don't eat pork. It was like, that's all I said that day. But it was just like Abba showed up and was a witness to something I had been saying to him. And it's just little things like that that I've seen happen over the years that have just spoke to me about Abba's goodness. Like I told you, my ex-wife's family she had a sister that was married a couple times, and she married this guy that ended up being a child molester. And he had a bunch of money, and he molested their children that was like 1 and 2 years old, like little bitty babies. And they lived in Atlanta at the time. And she tried to kill him with a butcher knife when she found out. I don't blame her. I probably would have too. But anyways, he had money, and he was able to actually get it to where she lost custody of the children. And after a several year custody battle, I think the kids were like 6 and 7 at this point. He was actually going to get custody of these kids back. And the whole family was just up in arms that the man that hurt these children was about to get custody of these children again. And I remember telling my ex-wife, I said, we're praying for the wrong thing. We're praying for Yahweh to take this man out. We're trying to convince Yahweh of what needs to be done here, what's necessary. But what's necessary is whatever Yahweh sees fit. I said, what we need to be praying for is that if it's Abba's will that this man could love these kids and actually not hurt them again, then his will be done in this. And if not, that Yahweh would protect those kids. 2 weeks before he was supposed to get custody of the kids, he had only had some temporary supervised visits up until this point. He went into the hospital and died of mysterious causes. They don't know why he died. He just went in the hospital, and like the next day was dead.
Wow.
Abba heard our prayers. He heard our prayers. I have seen Abba kill someone in the protection of a child. And I know that Abba hears prayers. There was a young man named Ian over in the Christian church over in Athens, and they are feast keepers, but they're Sunday Sabbath observant.
Okay.
And I had a friend down in Atlanta named Edge that would take me and my ex-wife there to fellowship with him because he was trying to get us away from the chaos of Crystal's family. That's my first wife. Trying to get us away from the chaos of her family. So he was taking us to places that were more rounded and more spiritually sound than what we were doing in home fellowships.
Right.
Was really making an effort to try and find us a new faith home. And the family, they had this young boy named Ian. He was probably like 13 years old and he had seizures. And I remember we were going there weekly after, because Ed would come up from Atlanta and stay the weekend. We would have Sabbath service at her mom's house. Then we would go to Sunday Sabbath service in Athens at Christian Church with Ed. And this was probably like 2007, 2008. We would go to church with Ed and he would take us to this family's house afterwards and we would eat lunch with them. We would spend time with them. And I remember just growing a really close bond. They had a big family, like 7 kids. And they were just like overwhelmingly beautiful family. Like just their love for each other. They did like the dad played bagpipes and had a very tight knit relationship with his kids. His kids did like river style dancing, like Irish jig dancing, and he would play the bagpipes. And anyways, Ian had seizures and stuff like that. And he had a really bad episode where it had debilitated him. And it was one week we were there. He was feeding himself fine, walking around, talking to me and Crystal, having just a good time. The next week we're back there and he's unable to go to the bathroom on his own. We're pushing him around the yard in a stroller. It's a 13-year-old kid, and we're having to put him in a big stroller and push him around the yard. And I had to carry him to the bathroom that day while I was there and help him go to the bathroom. And I just remember like how much he had changed from functioning to like a 2 or 3-year-old toddler. And Ed and myself and so Crystal, I was friends with Crystal all through high school, and she was born late. Her mom was 40 when she was born. So her next youngest sister was 15 years older than her. So she had nieces and nephews that were almost her age. She had a nephew, Elijah, that was 13, and I was 17 at the time. So I'm 4 years older than he is. Anyways, become very good friends with Elijah. Elijah has been a rock in my life for a very long time. It's very close. He'll be the best man at my wedding. I wouldn't have anybody else. I wouldn't even think of anybody else. But anyways, I remember Elijah was there at the house that day. I was there. Ed and Crystal was there. And we prayed over Ian. We prayed hard over Ian for over an hour. And I remember the next week we went back. So the doctors told the mom that Ian was not going to recover from this, that it was only going to get worse, that the seizures were going to get worse, and that he would never be able to function in the capacity that he had functioned the week prior to having those seizures. We prayed over him. And the very next week when we went back there, Ian was almost back to his full self.
Wow.
There was still, there was cognitive issues. He had cognitive issues to begin with.
Right.
But he was functioning. And he was functioning on a level that I would compare to the Ian that I had met when I first started going to them. And just seeing the power of that prayer over that kid. And Abba hearing our voices and hearing our hearts crying out for him. And Abba hearing us crying out for my ex-wife's niece and nephew. And just seeing that. And just little things I've seen the Father do like that. Like eating the Passover to me. Take it very, very seriously. Observing the Passover, eating the Passover meal is not something you do lightly.
Right.
So, scripturally speaking, when you're doing the offerings, a woman should not be eating of it in her uncleanness. We would calculate my wife's cycle, and in the years that it would fall, when it would happen, where it would be during the week of Passover, we would pray that it would come early or late so that she could observe the Passover with us and eat of the meal. And every single time it would happen that way. just like even the natural cycle of my wife's body could be affected by prayer. Just those moments in my life were the moments that were solidified my faith in the Father.
Mhm.
And it's just like, and then just little things where I've been in need of something and the very last moment to the dollar amount that I needed showed up. Or when I was working doing the assembly job, doing the in-store assembly, I remember thinking, you know, last year was a really good year. I made $20,000 last year. You know what? Next year, I'd like to make $30,000. And it happened.
Wow.
And then that wasn't even a spoken prayer. That was just something I was thinking about in my mind, talking to the Ruach within myself, and it manifested in my life through the power of the Father. I did it again. There was a later, the most I'd ever made at that job as an assembly technician was $68,000 in a year. And I had prayed, I was like, you know, I was talking to myself, it'd be nice to make $60,000 this year.
Wow.
And it happened.
Huh.
And it's just like,
Shows up.
yeah. And sometimes and sometimes it's not even me having to speak it out.
Yeah.
I just have to think it.
Yeah.
And the Father is so in tune with me that he hears even the smallest thoughts, the smallest supplications of my heart,
Right.
and grants those wishes. Like, how could he not exist?
Right.
How could I ever question his existence after that? Like, it's just astounding to me. Going back to my father, he played a pivotal role in molding me as the man that I am today, because he did teach me a lot of things, and he taught me one thing. He always taught me to defend the weak.
I was bullied when I was a kid, and that is one of the things that now, as an adult, and as you know, I was very small then, and I'm a little bigger now. I really despise bullies. It will bring the worst out in me.
I remember in high school, the preppy kids, like the rich kids with money that would pick on the kids that
Yeah.
didn't have good shoes or
Yeah.
stuff like that. I would make it my goal in life to make their life uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like, I would do everything in my power to be mean to them, to be rude to them, because I saw the way they treated other people. I'm like, you know what? We're going to have some retribution. We're going to have some justice, and I'm going to see to it. You know, and through my faith and through coming into a relationship with the Father, I realized the best justice is the Father's justice.
That's right.
And seeing that the Father can remove a wicked man, can end the life of someone who is going to do damage to a child, just shows me that he is an Elohim of justice, that he will repay.
Perfect. Yes.
Even if it's not right this moment, that his justice is true and it's everlasting.
And
he
right
will-
on time.
And the little bit of retribution I could get in this life is not going to affect that person to the level of retribution
Right.
that the Father can get against them.
Right.
But
Amen.
ultimately, it's not that I even desire that retribution take place against them. I desire that they come to a place of repentance.
Yeah.
Because I know through my own failures, through my own shortcomings, through my own emulating of my father, through being like him, through absorbing parts of his character that I didn't want any part of, that I can be forgiven for that stuff. That I can be an idiot, I can be a fool, and that the Father's love for me is that substantial. And it's like, even to the point where we don't understand it as people. There's the song Overwhelming Reckless Love of God. People say, well, God's love isn't reckless. It's the way we perceive it.
Right.
Because our forgiveness ends way down here compared to the Father's forgiveness. It's way up here for a lot of full stuff that we can do.
Yeah.
And it seems reckless to us, or we would write a song and call his love reckless because we don't fathom the level of forgiveness that he has for us as people. And that is something that just, it really is. It's overwhelming. It is overwhelming to me because, you know, I'm not that nice, but I want to be.
Yeah.
And I know that the Father works in me daily.
This is something that I'm actually right now in my life. That's the thing that I'm like really truly focused on right now, is because I've never actually been like, there's people out there that would perceive me as a nice guy, but I know me, and like, I've not been a nice guy. And now I'm like, I'm driven right now to like figure out. My constant prayer is, let me see them through your eyes. Let me see them through your eyes. And just trying very hard to intentionally love people and be nice. And Yeah, I'm not always successful, but it's amazing when we actually turn it over to him and let him work through us.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And I think the way that projection works in disparaging someone can work in encouraging someone
Yes.
also.
Yes.
Because we often project our own failures on other people
Mhm.
and then see them in a negative light. But what if we looked at those people the way that we look at ourselves when we were in the same place as them?
Right.
What if when I look at that crackhead walking down the street that's destroyed from whatever happened in his life or bad relationships or abuse or whatever, what if I look at them the way that I looked at myself in 2004, way that I forgave myself for all those years of the man that I was and the man that the Father made me not want to be anymore.
Yeah,
Like-
it's like human nature, though. It's like we want to be forgiven. Like we want the blood to cover us for all of our sins, but we don't want others sharing that. And that is so not where we're supposed to be.
Exactly.
We're supposed to be in that place of, it worked for me. It's got to work for them. How can I let them know that it will work for them?
Forgive others as you've also been,
Right.
as my Father in heaven has forgiven you.
Yeah.
And then I stand so firm on Jesus, Yeshua's words of saying, freely give as you freely receive.
Yeah.
And Abba has poured out so many blessings
Amen.
in my life, even in moments where I know I didn't deserve it.
Yeah.
I was not worthy of that blessing, and I still got it anyways.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because just like it rains on the just and the unjust, the blessings fall on the just and the unjust.
That's right.
And it's all about perception.
Yeah.
You know, my whole life is about perception. All those bad things that I told you today about the things that I went through, that molded me to be the man that I am today.
Yeah.
That gave me the heart to be able to love people.
Right.
That gave me the heart to be able to deal with people that are just profanity is like their second language. You know, my dad was in the military, from being in the military. The F word is an adjective.
One of the
Like
hardest things for me to stop using. It was so hard to break that.
Exactly. So, but because I'm conditioned to those things from my childhood, it doesn't
faze me when other people say
exactly
it.
when
Yeah.
somebody else says it, I don't cringe up and get like I know believers that get entirely uncomfortable. Like it vexes them in their spirit for someone to speak like that around them, and that's because they have the character of the Father in them, and it hurts them to hear those things, and they're not meant to reach those people.
Right.
Like it's not everybody's job to take out the trash or to clean the toilets or whatever. Like some dirty jobs are left to the people that are used to getting dirt.
Yeah.
And like I've been in those places. I've seen the dirt, I've seen the filth, I've been in the pit.
Yeah.
And it's like, why is that to me seasoned me to be able to communicate to those people and them speak in the way that's natural to them.
Yeah.
Because we can't force someone into this mindset of you have to fit what's natural to me so that I can evangelize you.
Right.
Like, or so that I can share my faith with you and what drew me to loving the Father. And, that's one of the biggest things for me is like knowing that all those things happened because Abba needed me to go through that.
And that's one of those things that, and I have this conversation with a lot of people during these testimonies, is when I used to do counseling with kids, I worked in co-occurring counseling. So it was an inpatient setting with some of the most mentally health affected kids that were self-medicating. And one of the things that I would always talk to them about is, as a Native American, I could speak at a spiritual level in secular realms. For some reason, it's acceptable if you're an Indian to do it. But if you're not, if you come in as just another average person as a believer, you're not allowed to talk about these things. But I could talk to them on a different level. But one of the things that I always shared with them was the fact that our Creator trusts us to go through those things, not because he desires us to be hurt, but he can make the good out of the bad. And most of the time does. But because of who we are, who he knows the end from the beginning, he knows who's going to come through, and then who's going to be able to use those experiences And so it's this level of trust that he knows, yeah, it's bad and people make bad choices, but you're going to come through this and you're going to be there for somebody in the future that's going to be experiencing those same things. And you're going to be able to use your experience to walk them through that, because we need somebody to walk through those things with. And so I can't think that all of the bad things that happened to me in my life were for naught. Like, if that was the case, then I don't know. I probably would lose hope. But it's always empowering to be able to utilize the experiences that I have, many of them negative, to walk through it with somebody else. And to this day, my wife and I both, we really strive when we see somebody going through something that we've experienced, to walk through it with them. Yeah.
You got to have the eyes to see that, though.
Yeah.
And I think without having the seasoning, then it's hard.
A lot of people
So-
come into the walk and they forget where they came from.
Exactly. Or some people just had a really good life,
Yeah.
and they don't understand it. And it's not my expectation for them to understand it.
No.
But that's why we all are the hands and feet of the body.
Yeah.
And we all have a different job.
Because they're going to reach somebody that I can't. Like,
Exactly.
I can't sit in a room with wealthy people and give them a testimony. You know, I'm not going to hear a word I got to say.
You give me the dirt bags and the sinners, because
Amen.
that's the ones that I relate to the most.
That's right. I've been there. So let's get to the point where this is kind of my favorite part in every episode, is when I ask those giving their testimony, like, when you look into that camera, like little Fred is sitting on the backside there. There's somebody in life right now that's going through the stuff that you went through. They're at some point in their life that you were at that point in your life. So if you could look into that camera and you were on the backside of that listening, what is it that you needed to hear? Then what would you have to say? If you
What
could
would I
talk
tell
to,
myself?
what would you tell yourself?
I think that the version of myself that I would want to talk to would be like the preteen, like 12, 13 years old, when I was really getting into my manhood. You know, and it's at that point where you really start to develop your adult character. And I think the thing that I would tell myself more than anything is that my father doesn't define me. That no matter how much he's failed, no matter how much he's hurt me, that who he is and the things he says to me doesn't define who I am as a man. When he gets mad at me and tells me all the things that he hates about me, that doesn't define me. That doesn't define my character. That doesn't mold who I am. And that the person that really truly defines my character is the Creator, and that he will always be with me. Then I would remind myself of something that happened when I was about 6 years old, that I didn't even think about it until my adult life. I would ride the school bus, and I had a key. I would wear a key around my neck. I'd let myself in from school, starting out at like 7 years old. Like, I'd just get off the school bus and I'd be at home by myself. Well, I remember one time they had cut a tree in our backyard because we were on a rental property, and they had dropped a log on the lid of the septic, and it cracked the septic tank completely. It was completely cracked, like all points of the septic tank was cracked. So they uncovered the dirt off the lid so they could replace it. And my dad told me specifically, don't be out in the backyard messing with that while nobody's here. Like, don't go out there, because I would play out in the yard. And so what did I do? I went out there and I'm messing around on the septic tank lid, and I'm like standing on it because it's cracked concrete and it's like moving. It moves a little bit. I'm standing on it and just messing around. And the concrete, while I was standing in the middle of the septic tank, caved in on me. And I was by myself, and I felt something push me off of the lid of that septic tank that day.
Right.
Like, push me down onto the ground, like up, like the force of someone standing behind me. And I know that there was whatever angel, a messenger, whatever it was, there was something. The Father's presence was there that day, and he protected me, because I feel that I could have died in that septic tank that day because it was full to the top. Like, I remember the splash of the concrete hitting the liquid inside the septic tank as I was pushed off. And I just know that even before I was really, truly a believer, that the Father was watching over me, that he had something for me to do in life, to the point that it was necessary to guard my life that day. And I would remind myself of that and tell myself to just remember that. And when the time was necessary, that I would understand what it meant. I think that's the two main things, that those two things, and love your mama, because you're going to miss her when
Amen.
she's gone.
Amen.
Because
I lost my mom
I've-
in 95.
I-
And that's my thing, is I just tell everybody, don't talk to your mom that way. I don't care if she's wrong, right, or indifferent. So when she's gone, you're going to miss her.
Exactly. My mama gets on my nerves sometimes because she's stubborn and hard-headed, and so am I, and that's why she gets on my nerves. But I tell you what, like in the last 5 years, I would say last 5 years, Papa's really taught me, like really put it in my heart, like what it means to love her and appreciate her. And she's done so much for me. Like I was having the end of 2024, I had a diabetic ulcer come up on my foot, and I wasn't taking care of myself, and I actually was going through congestive heart failure. My oxygen level was down to 74%, and my body was retaining fluid. My kidneys are failing. My kidneys are still currently failing. My kidney functions at 18% right now. Like that's only like 5% away from being on dialysis. But I'm recovering a lot. My foot has healed completely through prayer and doing things that the Father revealed to me. And my mother was a strategic part in all of that, and my healing of my foot, and taking care of me to the point of like being by my bed, bandaging my foot, just selflessly taking care of me and pouring herself out for me. And thinking about it and seeing her do that just reminded me of, she has done that my entire life. I have had a lifetime of a woman that has loved me that much. And if I can find a wife that loves me as much as my mom does, I will be a blessed man.
Amen.
Because even though my mom can be an adversary to me sometimes, my goodness, that woman loves me, and she would go to bat for me against anyone. Like I cannot bear witness enough to how willing that woman is to fight for me and to love me through whatever kind of selfishness or whatever I'm doing. And, so love your mama and just appreciate it, even if she gets under your skin sometimes, appreciate all the little things, because the little things are what makes the big picture.
Yeah. Me and my mom were oil and water, and I wish I'd have been a lot more tolerant. I'd give anything to have her back. Yeah, I'm with you there. Love your mama. You'll miss her when she's gone. All right. Well, thank you, Fred. I appreciate you coming in and sharing this testimony. This is I enjoy getting to see this side of you. We've got to talk, but I haven't really got to know you real well. But
You know me real good now.
I know you real good, and I mean it speaks volumes to the man that you are. And I appreciate you coming in and sharing this and being willing to share the testimony. For those of you that are out there, we'd like to say thank you for joining us, and just remember to keep your head up. There's always hope. Don't give up hope. And until next time, I love you. I want the best for you, and thank you so much for tuning in. God bless.